Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss, where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Why, hello again. Here we are back again with another side question episode of Inside the GM Studio, where we field questions from the internet. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
Well, Matt's going to give me a question on a list that's hopefully not a repeat on the roll of a die, because we try to keep shit analog around here, you know, keep it real. 17.
17. Let's go here. Ooh, okay. Bring this over here. All right, this one comes from Clint Postiff on RS Game Masters with the title, How Do You Improve Storytelling? I'm a fresh... hold on.
Take two.
Take one half. I'm fresh to D&D, specifically Daggerheart. They must be a new player, because only newer players say they play D&D when they're talking about playing tabletop role-playing games.
Yes.
I was always the quiet kid, never liked to socialize, so I don't like to talk much, which is irony, since my friends wanted me to be their DM. So I did a quick one-shot, basically a prequel for the main campaign, but my storytelling is so bad. Do you guys have any tips? And please, don't say read books, because I can't focus enough to read that much. Anyway, my first ever DMing was... I wouldn't say completely terrible. Thankfully, we were playing Daggerheart, so it's a little bit easier with the collective narrative that we do with Daggerheart. But still, immersion was terrible because I couldn't really say much. Thankfully, combat side of the game saved me, and that was pure joy for all of us. Any hints, tricks, I would really appreciate it. And before you ask, no one else can DM or would want to.
Okay. So, first of all, shut the fuck up with I can't be bothered to read. Like, shut up. Like, forever, full stop, shut the fuck up. Like, you want to be better at telling stories, you have to read things. Like, how are you going to figure out what people say in this post if you don't want to read something?
True.
You are a bad storyteller because you don't have a grasp on the basic precepts of how a story is crafted. And if you don't ever read, that is why. But given that he said, like, oh, I don't want to read, okay, fine. Like, I'm just going to take that at face value, even though I think you should. I don't think you're cut out to be a DM if you can't be bothered to read anything. Like, how do you know the rules? How did you figure out the book? You don't read the books? You don't read your adventures? It's just like, what? As basic boilerplate shit. But as I'm always on about, films are stories too. Mm-hmm. And what you need to do is familiarize yourself with the language of storytelling. This is hard to do if you don't read, but can be done if you just choose to watch films or watch videos on the YouTube about the art of story crafting.
That's what I was actually going to say, is a good YouTube video, even if it's about story crafting or just somebody telling a story on YouTube that you just sit back and listen to.
Yeah, but really, it takes a lot longer to pick up on the precepts of storytelling by just absorbing it through good storytelling. So a thoughtful approach to the actual craft of storytelling is useful. And when you really drill down into it and you're thoughtful about it, think about a story that someone has told you. Like, what are the components of a good story, right? There's usually some sense of mystery, anticipation. There are high stakes. There's forward momentum. The characters likely learn something. They face confrontations, and presumably there's some sort of catharsis when they overcome or are defeated by those threats. But there's a common mistake that a lot of GMs make, which would probably encapsulate insofar as I'm not good at talking or good at flavor or good at whatever, so I'm not a very good storyteller. Those things do make you a lot, it does make it a lot easier for you to be a good storyteller if you are good with language. And again, see my previous point of how you get good with language is by immersing yourself in language. And reading is a very good way to do that. But, I can't be bothered. Fine, I get it. But don't fall into the trap of thinking that you need to be incredibly verbose, that you need to talk a lot to your players, talk in caricature, set vivid scenes, or any of that to tell a decent story. You can have a pretty bare bones GM approach where you're not going on for great lengths, painting vivid pictures or crafting layered NPCs or having lots of twists and turns in your plots and still be a pretty effective storyteller as long as you understand the basic precepts of structure of a story. And that usually comes from just study. There's a variety of different methods, right? The most traditional, which in film is typically the 3-act structure, but there's also a 5-act structure. And then some people, most notably like John Truby, throws the idea of like an act structure out the window. He just says like, that's not what's important. What's important is the characters' arcs.
And what's the one with the circle? Do you remember what that one is?
Yeah, that's typically just a variation on the whole idea of rising action, falling action, but it's more
meeting
it's
the goddess at that point, and then this and this, the mentor and all that shit.
Right,
or
right.
the hero's journey, I guess.
Yeah, so just familiarize yourself with things and how they break down. If you pin down your pacing, your problem's not with storytelling, most likely. Your problem is with pacing, most likely. So you just need to start with a few basic precepts. One, what is the central conflict facing your characters? Like, is it a villain? Is it an event? What is it that they're striving to overcome, right? The challenge, so to speak. In a D&D adventure, or in his case, Daggerheart, apparently he doesn't understand those are different games. You just establish like what is the central conflict? Like what is it the players are trying to get to happen or not happen? Then you go, okay, then I have that. Then there needs to be an embodiment of that, right? This is typically a villain. And the villain's role is to attack the character's greatest weaknesses. And in order to establish what their greatest weakness is, you need to establish why this goal matters to the party. And it doesn't need to be layered, personal, whatever. It can just be generic enough, and often in role-playing games is pretty generic. It matters because the heroes are heroes and they care about X thing because they're good guys and they don't want bad thing to happen to whatever. So, but the more you can tie that to something personal, probably the better. A village in peril is much more pressing if it's one of the characters' villages, if it's someone that the characters care about or whatever. So you don't need to have a whole like depth chart of NPCs, but this is the role of NPCs, which is a sounding board for these things that are external in the world. So once you have that central conflict and what motivates the central conflict, the players and why they care about it, then you have a villain, and the villain's job is to kind of niggle the characters in some way that like bothers them, disrupts their whatever, throws complications in their way. So then you have that basic structure. So you know where you want it to end. It ends with some sort of final confrontation, and you know where it starts, which is it starts with some sort of call to action, right? The players need to, they become aware of this threat, and they're aware that they need to go on some sort of journey that defeats the threat. So then you start to think about, those are your bookends, and then you start to think about just a plot arc. A plot arc has an inciting incident, something that kicks off. Then there usually is some sort of movement in the plot. In slower burning stories and films, it could be just emotional progress or character work. But in the case of an adventure, it probably will be literal movement from place to place, from dungeon to dungeon, from village to village, from whatever, right? It feels more quest oriented if the players are switching locations and they're pursuing goals that are in different locations, presumably of increasing degrees of severity, right? This gets into the stakes of the story, which is what do the players stand to gain and what do they stand to lose? And each leg of the journey should be more treacherous than the previous leg because this shows character growth, which is going to be encapsulated by your character's leveling. So once you have an inciting incident, then you have what's called rising action, which is you're building toward a culmination of the plot. And you would typically think of this as like a bell curve, but it's really not structured like a bell curve because the plot concludes pretty quickly after you reach the summit of the plot arc. But there's some important beats that follow that allow you to kind of feel like the story has come to a satisfactory end. So you just place obstacles in front of the characters, and typically try to have some sort of progress and a setback, right? So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Something the players through grit and skill get something. Maybe it's from one location to another, they get some information, they defeat an enemy, they have some revelation, they uncover some useful machinations of the bad guy. But then there's a complication. There's some monsters in their way. There's somebody that betrays them. There's whatever. There's a whole slew of ways you can add these complications in, but they're a wrench in the works so that the party has to redouble its efforts. And this makes them formidable because if it's just clear sailing, it's just upward trajectory and nothing really stands in their way, there's no unexpected complications, the players will feel like the plot is a little stagnant because they're just like, everything we know is going to happen. We're just going through the motions of making it happen. So you need to throw things in there that throw them off kilter a little bit. Then you presumably progress on to get to the culmination of the conflict. There is some victory, and then you have like falling action where you kind of calm down from the central conflict, where they call a denouement, and may or may not include an epilogue depending on whether you intend to continue the adventure onward, and might have an epilogue if there's going to be a respite between one adventure and the other, right? Where a new threat builds itself and the players have taken some time between the adventure, and then they need to kind of more mighty than they were before. They redouble their team and plunge headlong into a new conflict bigger than the last one. However, if it's just going to be an adventure that just like literally continues on, I mean, you can have the plot arc resolved just after the central conflict is over. You kill the bad guy, yay, treasure, and then you can just fade to black, so to speak, and then pick up however much time later you want. So that's the basic structure, and don't mistake being a lyrical speaker or somebody that like keep things simple when it comes to NPCs and when it comes to plot beats. If you're worried that you might not be able to layer more sophisticated storytelling techniques, it takes a long time. And even though I'm fairly adept at a lot of these things, I have a tendency to keep plots pretty simple and keep stories pretty simple. But you're striving for a catharsis, which is to say that the stakes are in some way internalized to the character, and they feel a sense of triumph, a sense of relief, a sense of defeat, a sense of something that like alleviates the tension of the entire conflict. So every time the group of players get closer to the source of the conflict and toward that final confrontation, you should be ratcheting up the tension with every go so that it cries out for alleviation in some way. If you're doing that, it doesn't matter if you have really well realized, interesting characters. It doesn't really matter if you're pulling on your character's backstory, you can set a vivid scene, you have dynamic combat, and none of that really matters. I mean, it does matter, it all adds to the experience, but if you're just having the basic structure of a story that allows you to, the players to gain experience, to learn something, and to have a catharsis at the end, then it'll be pretty satisfying for the players. I don't know, anything to tack onto that there, Matt?
Oh yes, because I've been reading through the comments here, and Klimpostif, our original poster, uh, has been filling some people in because a lot of people are like, "You're being a little vague, dude. Can you, tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for?" So they say, here is yeah, so here is an example of what I'm talking about. This is how I would set up a scene. So you all travel down the road through the forest. I guess there's a tower ahead and some rocks. I guess it's about 6 p.m. What do you want to do? I want to get away from that. I want to do something a little bit bigger, a little bit grander for the group. They don't seem to ever have a real problem with it, but I want to do better for them. So this here, and David and I have talked about this. Hell, we've talked about it off the show about how to make this better. And well, we've also talked about it off the show about the show itself. Just listen to yourself sometimes. Sit back, slow down, because they said in here that has a hard time finding words to describe the scenes, mostly because of their stage fright, quote unquote, and because it all sounds so cringe to them, especially NPC dialogues. Not as cringe as our buddy Cody's new character's accent. That's really cringy. But that's what I guess practice is for. Yes. One thing that I've tried to do, even though it's not as apparent as of late, try to slow down, listen to myself, and change some of my old habits while trying to do better at some others. There is, I can't think of the name of it though. There's a really good, oh shit, was that an audiobook? What is it? It's a, oh God, what was it called? Now I'm going to totally butcher it here. Paint Pictures in People's Minds is what it's called. And I think I watched a YouTube video on it, but it's all talking about that, just kind of describing atmospheres pretty much, helping you be a little bit more, just better at painting a picture really when you want people to really know what you're talking about. It's a good practice to do that. But yeah, it's kind of just sitting back and relaxing because you're around your friends, really. And as much as I just gave Cody shit for his cringy accent, none of us have told him to stop. It's his own shit. Hell, sometimes I get a kick out of it because it's fucking hilarious how bad it is.
It's the problem with that. First of all, I'm unclear whether the guy here in question is actually writing stories. It almost sounds like he's basically just doing what we would call winging it.
Yep.
Back in the day, that is no way to write an adventure. I will tell you right now, stop that. Have some things that are going to happen, even if it's just a rough outline, so you know why each leg of the journey matters. Then you don't have to have these big florid descriptions of things. You just go like, okay, what's intriguing about this scene, right? You see a tower up ahead and there's a path in front of you, is like, it's factual information. And there's nothing wrong with factual information. We often call that exposition, right? You need to know where your characters are in space and where they are in time, like what day it is and where they are and shit. But those things shouldn't really be the emphasis of any given description. You should think to yourself, why is this tower... first of all, are the PCs supposed to go explore the tower? Is this a goal that they've set? And why is it intriguing? What calls out for exploration? Is there some mystery? Is there some tension? And if so, try to just give the PCs a little of that. You don't need all of the like descriptive, vivid picture painting if you just create some sort of immediacy. You could say, like, sometimes even long-winded description can get in the way of immediacy. Matt and I have talked about this before on the show, where it's like you hear cries from the other side of the dungeon door, and you fling the door open, and you see a 30 by 30 room. It's more or less a square. There's a table in the middle of the room, and on the table there's a cornucopia of food. In one corner there's a brazier that's lighting the room up, filling the room with the scent of charcoal and smoke. And beyond that, there's a weapon rack, and there's 4 long swords and 3 halberds on the weapon rack. In the middle of the room is a goblin with a knife to a woman's throat, and she's crying out for your help. It's like, wow, way to bury the fucking lead there. Start
and
there.
There's only 3 pairs of shoes. Who does the third pair of shoes belong to?
Yeah, it's like no one cares. Start with the immediacy. You don't even need any like auxiliary or ancillary description. You fling open the door and you see a goblin with a knife pointed to a woman's neck. Oh my god, immediacy. Oh my god, danger. Oh my god, an innocent to save. Like, let's get into combat, right? That if you're doing that with each beat of your story, providing some immediacy, then you keep the pacing pretty good, and you keep the dramatic stakes intact, which doesn't require lots of mood and atmosphere. It's a good thing you're playing a fantasy-based RPG, which is much more dynamic, action-oriented, fast-paced. Stakes are evident. If you were playing something like Call of Cthulhu, or you were playing VTM, or you were playing something that required on a lot of mood and atmosphere and dread and all that, then yeah, you would be not well suited to do this. But fantasy-based RPGs really don't need that as much as other genres do. Try to think of what's immediate, what's intriguing, where is the danger, and what is moving the plot forward. Anything that's not doing any of those 3 things is just stagnating, and you don't need a lot of description in any given thing to just, you could even just like that simple sparse description that he gave, have some noises that are intriguing. Someone calling out, something's on fire, they see smoke rising, they whatever, they see tracks on the ground leading to something that draws them in, not just.
Or the best answer of all, because like they said earlier, because they're playing Daggerheart, the other players are helping out. That's the best one right there. If you can't think of a good picture to describe, or if you don't feel like you do it adequately, pawn it off on one of the players, dude. Tell you what, there's always at least one player that doesn't mind setting the scene. And as long as you know where you want your story to go, you can have the players kind of like fill it in.
Yeah. You need that basic scaffolding though, and that's what I was talking about with the arc. If you have that basic scaffolding of like where the plot is going, why it's important, what are the stakes, what are the threats, what are the carrot that you're dangling in front of the players to get them curious. That's always what you want. You want the players curious as to like what lies beyond a door, what lies off to one side of the path. Is there danger? Is there treasure? Is there glory? Are we on the right track? Like they need to be curious, and if they're not curious because all you're doing is giving them rote descriptions of their environment, then that just seems stagnant. Like then they feel like they're not on the trail of the plot, and you need to make sure that they are on the trail of the plot and communicate to them. If anything, when you're a little more florid with your descriptions, that can be a red herring to players sometimes. If you're very sparse and economic and minimalist with your descriptions, your players know anything that comes out of your mouth is fucking relevant to the plot.
Yeah.
Right? You describe something in lurid detail, and it might actually be like, I wonder what was the DM took a lot of time like explaining what was going on with this tree, and I'm gonna go over and investigate the tree, and in your head you're like, no, the tree, that was just flavor text. Like, what are you doing? The tree is like off the path. Like, but if you're just like, you're walking down a trail and there's this motherfucker in front of you and he's got a cart and he looks like he's up to no good, and he looks over and sneers at you, and you're just like, okay, fuck, that guy's up to no good, let's go get him, right? And it's like bam. And so just don't think that you need to be providing depth. Economy is fine, but it needs to be purposeful. If it's not purposeful and it just seems to be kind of filling in like I don't know, what are you doing? Like you just have a complete sandbox adventure with no structure as to like what is happening or where the plot is going, then you're just going to be floundering and your players will be confused as to what to do. It sounds like he has fairly autonomous players, which is
Mhm.
good. Um, but don't hold yourself to too high of a standard of being somebody that can like weave an intricate story because based on your description of not wanting to read any books, that is probably not ever going to happen. So just try to
Yeah.
make sure that the conflict is present, the intrigue is there, and the players have something pushing them toward their next goal. If you do that, you can be sparse with it, and then when things get more like combat oriented or skill challenge oriented, you're probably not going to have a lot of role playing encounters, but that's fine. You don't need to speak in character. You can paraphrase what people say. You know, he tells you that it's down the road and at the top of the hill. You don't need to say, "Well, gee, golly, there, adventurers! Like here's here's just tell him what he says. Give him a paraphrase. It's fine."
Yeah.
And just get to the next thing that the players are waiting for that alleviates some of that tension.
All right. I think that brings an end to that question. Anything to give your final thoughts on there, Dave?
Read a book.
Yes, I will